Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 11 waiver wire targets for the 2025 fantasy football season, talking about the best available pickups at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, kicker, and defensive positions going into Week 11. As we all know, there are two teams on bye, the Indianapolis Colts and New Orleans Saints. So besides those two teams, and of course, valuable prospects missing from our lineups, many of us are dealing with inconsistency of play from our prospects or a plethora of injuries. Of course, more additional injuries added on based on the efforts of Week 10. J.K. Dobbins on Thursday, Jackson Dart in the concussion protocol. We have Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Arante Gadsden, Dalton Kincaid, all dealing with injuries. Therefore, I'll mention players who are the best available pickups, not only for this upcoming week, but hopefully for the remainder of the season in order to help you capture a 2025 fantasy football championship. For those of you who are trying to get one step closer to achieving that goal, of course, subscribe to the channel as I'm making daily fantasy football content with a singular goal in mind in order to help you. Later tonight, after the Monday Night Football game, of course, I'll be live streaming here on the channel, so be sure to swing on by, subscribe, click the bell notification button. Thank you very much. Now, speaking of tonight's game, for those of you guys who are trying to potentially put together some plays via Betr for the Monday night game, whether or not you do have players implicated, be sure to travel down to the description of the video and check out Betr. Like I've mentioned before, I'm partnering with them for the entirety of the season, not only to provide Sunday morning rankings, but of course plays on a daily basis. In regards to tonight's plays, again, I really do like the potential of Josh Jacobs, anytime touchdown. Jordan Love going more than 10.5 rushing yards, and Dallas Goedert more than 3.5 receptions. So for those of you who sign up today using code Andrew, make that first time deposit minimum of 10 and make a first time play minimum of $1 within a real cash play. Not only are you going to be able to take advantage of the opportunity of these plays, but you'll get my rankings sent from my email directly to yours every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. These rankings are by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, all encompassing rankings that help you set your lineup. And for those of you who sign up today, besides getting a free $10, you'll also get the free pick of Jalen Hurts going into tonight's game. So take advantage of the opportunity. Check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility based on your current location. Again, I'll talk about these plays at a greater extent in regards to why I feel so confident regarding them going into tonight. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's talk about the wide receiver position to begin with Week 11. As you guys can see, we have Alec Pierce, Parker Washington, Tez Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, Darius Slayton, and Christian Watson on screen. These are all wide receivers, in my opinion, that should already be rostered. As it currently stands, these are all wide receivers that are currently, outside of Christian Watson, rostered in 50+% of sleeper leagues. Therefore, if these players aren't already rostered in your league, do yourself the favor and please pick them up. We're talking about Alec Pierce, who has gone for over 12 plus fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games in a half PPR scoring format. And even though, yes, they are going on a bye week this week, this is a rest of season pickup as one of the favorite targets of Daniel Jones for the remainder of the year. And as the Colts schedule goes forward, there are going to be a lot more difficult running opportunities for Jonathan Taylor, which will lead Daniel Jones through the air to, of course, finding success with Alec Pierce. Then we have Parker Washington, who continues to serve as this team's #1 receiving option in the absence of Travis Hunter and BTJ. And as long as those injuries are going to keep those players absent for more considerable time, of course, Parker Washington, who's coming off of a game in which he scored 2 touchdowns on Sunday and coming off of 13 plus fantasy points in each of the last 2 games, is going to continue to be a viable option. Then we have Tez Johnson, who, according to Todd Bowles, is going to continue to see a lot more utilization within this offense, considering not only is Mike Evans probably going to miss up until week 16, but Chris Godwin's return is not expected anytime soon. Todd Bowles said there wasn't a timeline on his potential for return. So if Tez Johnson is going to continue to be the #2 wide receiver option for the foreseeable future for this incredibly high-powered Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, of course, he has incredible value going forward, coming off of a week in which he scored 2 receiving touchdowns against that great New England Patriots secondary. Then we have Jerry Jeudy, who finally found signs of life this season, post-bye week. Of course, got himself a lot of opportunity within the receiving category. Going forward, the Browns wide receivers technically have the second easiest schedule ahead. So hopefully Jerry Jeudy going forward, regardless of who's playing quarterback, is going to see himself a steady share of targets as we go forward. Then we have Darius Slayton, who in this overall situation has the easiest strength of schedule at the wide receiver position going forward. And as we have Jackson Dart probably missing this week with the concussion protocol, I think Russell Wilson certainly does increase the potential for upside for Darius Slayton within the upcoming matchup. And then we have Christian Watson, who again, with all the injuries that have taken place within this Green Bay Packers receiving core and tight end group, of course, there's a possibility in which he should be of value not only tonight, and you have an opportunity to pick him up right now before the Green Bay Packers take on the Philadelphia Eagles. But if all these wide receivers are already rostered in your league, I wanted to mention players like Jayden Reed. Chimere, Dike, Mack Hollins, who going into this week could very easily be a value. Jayden Reed is expected to potentially return, if not week 11, week 12. And as we go forward for the remainder of the season, there is a lot of value in the absence of Tucker Kraft for Jayden Reed to be a value point within the slot receiving role of this offense. With Matthew Golden dealing with an injury, with Tucker Kraft out for the remainder of the season, yes, Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson will dominate on the outsides, but over the middle of the field, Jayden Reed will certainly be the general within that category as we go forward. Then we have Chimere, Dike, who, if in fact, I just want to mention this, if Calvin Ridley, who is currently available in 60+% of leagues on Sleeper, if he's potentially available, probably pick him up as he should be healthy coming off of the hamstring off this bye week. But if Chimere, Dike is the next best available prospect, I think going in his direction, as he has been the go-to wide receiver option in this offense for over the course of the last 3 weeks, I feel very confident in his potential as this offense continues to learn, and of course the rapport between Dike and Cam Ward builds. Then we have Mack Hollins, who, as long as Kayshon Boutte going to miss this upcoming week's game, they have a Thursday night short week, so there's a likelihood in which Kayshon Boutte and Ramondre Stevenson are both going to be out. In the event in which he misses, we got to remember that Mack Hollins' best season statistically in his entire career was in Vegas with Josh McDaniels. So going into this upcoming week with the opportunity share that he has seen in 2 of the last 3 games, 6 and 7 receptions, that has led to 12.4 and 13.6 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format, could very easily be a start against the Jets on Thursday night. All right, let's move on to the running back conversation, beginning with Kareem Hunt and Tyjae Spears, 2 running backs who went on bye week this most recent week. And if in fact they were dropped from teams in your league, I know Kareem Hunt's currently rostered in 67% of sleeper leagues, Tyjae Spears 53%. But again, if in fact we have a situation which Isaiah Pacheco is not available this week once again, Kareem Hunt has already designated that he can serve as the clear and away RB1 of this organization, not only this season, but also in 2024. And taking on the Denver Broncos this week would not be a problem. I would also prioritize him at the top of the conversation of running back because the way that they prioritize him within the goal line category of this Kansas City Chiefs offense. Then we have Tyjae Spears. There's going to be a lot of negative game scripts going forward, considering the Tennessee Titans have the second most difficult running back rushing schedule ahead from weeks 11 through 17, considering the difficulty of this schedule. And Spears being the primary receiving back of this organization, he should see himself a lot of receptions as we go forward. Then we have Tyler Allgeier, who is currently rostered in 37% of leagues, should already be on roster behind Bijan Robinson in every single available league. But if you haven't handcuffed him, there's a possibility in which you can go ahead and pick him up and utilize him this week and potentially the next 2 weeks after that as they take on Carolina, New Orleans, and the New York Jets in the next 3 games. He's coming off of a week in which he had 10+ rushing attempts, 2 rushing touchdowns, sapped all the value from Bijan Robinson. But nonetheless, if the Panthers couldn't stop the run from Alvin Kamara, I mean, they're obviously not going to be able to stop the run from what the Atlanta Falcons will be providing this week. Then we have Emari Demercado. In the event in which we do have Trey Benson missing another consecutive game, obviously coming off of the arthroscopic knee surgery that he had earlier this season in order to deal with his situation, if Emari Demercado is going to continue to get himself opportunities, of course, he has been a burst runner and found a lot of success fantasy-wise, coming off of a week of 11.9 fantasy points. Obviously, this backfield changes in terms of their overall opportunity splits every single time out. 1 week it's Bam Knight, the next it's Michael Carter, the next it's Emari Demercado, and then we're back to Bam Knight. So who knows? But ultimately could certainly be of value taking on the 49ers defense. Then we have Devin Singletary. In the absence of Jackson Dart, there's even more opportunities down near the goal line for this offense to find success. And considering Brian Daboll was fired earlier today, there is a possibility in which Devin Singletary could get himself more looks. And if in fact they want to lean away from Tyrone Tracy, which I doubt they're going to do, but at least maybe have a 2-headed monster going forward, Devin Singletary can certainly be of value. The final player I wanted to mention at running back is Brian Robinson Jr. The fact that he's only rostered in 33% of leagues is incredibly shocking, considering he is the keys to the San Francisco 49ers backfield kingdom. And of course, in the last 2 games, he has been fantasy relevant at 10+ fantasy points in each of those 2 contests. And if they're going to continue to utilize him in this capacity, he could very easily be the next Tyler Allgeier, where he is a stud running back behind an elite running back and only sees himself a couple opportunities here and there. But taking on Arizona this week, this could be a one-sided affair in which we do see a lot of his second half contributions from Brian Robinson, as he has done in each of the last 2 games, regardless of whether they're winning or losing. Let's move on to the tight end conversation. For those of you who potentially lost Gadsden or Kincaid this most recent week, we have 3 available incredible options, beginning with Dalton Schultz, who from weeks 3 through 5 found a lot of consistency with 5 receptions per game for 3 straight games. But since the bye week, in terms of total target opportunity, has been incredible. 10, 3, 8, and 11 targets. Of course, the games in which he has had 8 or more targets led to 10.7, 14.3, and 14.8 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. He's number 4 amongst all tight ends as of this current moment in time in terms of total receptions this season, and now has an opportunity of taking on the Titans, who in the last 4 games are allowing 11.53 fantasy points per game in a half PPR to opposing tight ends. An incredible pickup and play, only rostered in 33% of sleeper leagues. Then we have Cade Otton, who, as long as we're going to continue to see Evans and Godwin missing, in the last 3 weeks in their absence has had 9, 5, and 12 targets, which has led to 10.0, 6.0, and 12.7 half PPR fantasy points. Of course, he's a little bit more valuable in a full PPR format, but nonetheless, taking on the Bills this week, it is a more difficult matchup, but as long as Godwin and Evans continue to miss time, Cade Otton is certainly implicated within a top 3 receiving role within this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. Then we close out with Theo Johnson. I understand that Jackson Dart is most likely going to miss this week, and majority of the value in which Theo Johnson has been able to command over the course of the last 2 months is because of Jackson Dart. Since week 4, he's been averaging 10.0 fantasy points per game, and throughout that span of time has been the number 4 overall tight end in terms of total points scored in fantasy football. So even with Russell Wilson taking over this week, this is a play for not just week 11, but for the remainder of the season, considering how much value Theo Johnson has been able to command. Now, if we're looking for other alternative options, potentially future options, maybe the future being this upcoming week, we have Pat Freiermuth, who takes on the Cincinnati Bengals, a defense that's allowing 24.96 fantasy points per game in the last 5 games to opposing tight ends. Last time out against this secondary and this defense, Pat Freiermuth had 5 receptions, 111 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns for 25.6 points in week 7 against the Bengals. The Bengals have allowed 10 or more fantasy points in a half PPR to 7 different tight ends in the last 7 weeks. Expects for a lot of success from Pat Freiermuth. Now, like I mentioned earlier, on Friday of this most recent week, we talked about rest of season trade targets. And for those of you who are looking for some potential pickups at the tight end position for the fantasy playoffs, I pointed you in the direction of Darren Waller and Brenton Strange, who can certainly be of value for those of you who are in a thin league, but both of these are available on the waiver wire because they are on the injured reserve. Darren Waller from weeks 4 through 6 put up 14.2, 16.3 and 8.2 fantasy points. He had scored 4 touchdowns in 3 games. In my opinion, he is a solid option as an IR stash for the fantasy playoffs, as in those 3 fantasy weeks, he takes on Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Tampa Bay, which is again the number 1 matchup at the tight end position throughout the fantasy playoffs in terms of fantasy points per game allowed on average from the defenses they take on. Then we have Brenton Strange, who is available in even a greater share of leagues, 18% rostered right now on Sleeper, could end up returning as early as this week. And considering, again, BTJ, Travis Hunter dealing with injuries, there's even a greater opportunity for Brenton Strange, who prior to his injury was the number 1 option within this offense in terms of total receptions and receiving yards amongst all their players. Therefore, he could certainly make an impact on his immediate return. And in the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15 through 17, for those of you who want to stash him, there's an opportunity in which he takes on the Jets, Denver Broncos, and Indianapolis Colts throughout those 3 weeks. Again, those 3 teams giving up 14.26 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends throughout that stretch of time. All right, let's move on to the quarterback conversation. I just wanted to begin with Mac Jones really quickly. Again, Mac Jones is coming off of a game of an 85% passing completion percentage, 300 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Assuming Brock Purdy misses another game, playing against the Arizona Cardinals, I would fire up Mac Jones immediately as all the available options as a streaming potential. Mac Jones is incredible, 10% rostered, unbelievable. He's had 3 consecutive games of 2 or more passing touchdowns. And as long as the Arizona Cardinals defense continues to struggle in terms of injuries, especially in their secondary, both their primary starting cornerbacks were missing this most recent game. Obviously, they got boat raced out of the building offensively and defensively, but nonetheless, Kyle Shanahan did mention after the game that they don't want to rush Purdy back and have the exact same thing that happened in that Jacksonville Jaguars game happen again. Considering they're continuing to perform well with Mac Jones, I would anticipate he starts this week once again. But in the event in which you're looking for not just a 1-week streaming option, but someone that is going to be an option for you every single week for the remainder of the season, maybe, we have Jacoby Brissett, who in the last 4 games, fantasy-wise, has been incredible. Since week 6, he's the number 9 overall quarterback in terms of fantasy points per game on average, putting up fantasy point totals of 20.7, 19.76, 24.84, and 19.42. Hasn't put up less than 19 fantasy points in the last 4 games in a 4-point per passing touchdown league. The 49ers have allowed 2 or more passing touchdowns in 5 of the last 6 games, an automatic pick up and play as a streaming option for those of you who need to fill in for Daniel Jones. Then we have Marcus Mariota, the next option here, rostered in 28% of sleeper leagues in the last 4 starts, 20.28, 16.24, 11.32, and 18.72, averaging 16.64 fantasy points per game, and is a serviceable streaming option for those of you who are in need of a quarterback going forward. Now, in regards to the final quarterback option, I wanted to mention both these teams take each other on. Miami versus Washington. We have Tua Tagovailoa in a game in which, of course, he didn't do much fantasy-wise, but taking on Washington is as easy of a matchup as it gets, as this defense has given up 3+ passing touchdowns to 4 straight quarterbacks. So why not Tua this week, as this team has been incredible in 2 of their last 3 contests. All right, let's close out today's episode by talking about some kickers and defenses going into the given week. Of course, Cam Little, the guy who currently holds the record for the longest field goal in NFL history, certainly somehow is still rostered in only 34% of sleeper leagues. When you can make a 70-yard field goal, why not have this guy on roster taking on the Chargers this week? Then we have Evan McPherson coming off of the bye week in the last 3 games with Joe Flacco. 17.0, 8.0, 10.0 fantasy points. Takes on Pittsburgh this week in a game which should be a shootout, which should implicate a lot of overall opportunity for Evan McPherson. Then we have Kaimi Fairbairn, who did not play this most recent week, dealing with a little bit of a quad injury, but in his last 5 games when healthy, 9, 18, 8, 14, 17. If he's healthy, assume for him to go ahead and score a bunch of points against the Titans this week, regardless of who's playing quarterback. Then we close out with the defensive conversation, beginning with the Baltimore Ravens. Why are they only rostered in 49% of leagues? The last 2 games, they've put up 9 and 17 fantasy points against 2 solid offenses. Therefore, if we're going to be in a situation in which we have the Baltimore Ravens going up against Cleveland and the New York Jets in the next 2 games, please have them on roster, as they're going to be top 5 in both of those weeks, dominating within their overall performances. Then we have the Los Angeles Chargers defense, who has allowed only 10, 14, and 10 points in the last 3 games. That defense is playing incredibly well, and taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, who again don't have very many healthy pieces out there, there's an opportunity in which, of course, there's going to be a lot of field goals made from Cam Little and less touchdowns being provided, which could mean even more opportunities for the Jacksonville Jaguars offense in a negative game script to turn over the ball in the direction of the Chargers. Then we close out with the Chicago Bears. 24% rostered. J.J. McCarthy made a lot of mistakes in this most recent week, and of course made a lot of mistakes in week 1. And if they're going to go ahead and dial up the pressure in the same way in which they did week 1 against McCarthy, outside of that 4th quarter performance, Chicago's defense can certainly make a lot of noise within the upcoming game. All right, that's going to cover it in regards to my waiver wire pickups for week 11 of the 2025 fantasy football season. Hope you guys enjoyed today's content in regards to some potential pickups. Again, I'll be live later tonight after the Monday Night Football game, answering any and all questions regarding these players or anybody who potentially pops off in this upcoming game between the Packers and the Eagles. Now, speaking of those players, let's talk about a couple of the plays that I'm putting together for tonight's better play of the day. Let's check that out right now. So going into tonight, like I mentioned before, my 3 favorite plays begin with Josh Jacobs anytime touchdown. He has been able to score 1 touchdown minimum in 16 of the last 17 games of his career. As long as he continues this streak of success, of course, I'm going to have him within my play of the day. Again, taking on the Philadelphia Eagles defense has not been the most difficult matchup for the running back position. And as long as this team continues to rely upon his rushing, specifically within the red zone, expect for a lot of success in this overall circumstance. Then if we continue on with staying on the same side of that football, with Jordan Love and his potential for rushing, I like him going more than 10.5 rushing yards, primarily because we have seen him accomplish this in 5 of the last 7 games. And again, if we're going to continue to talk about the defensive matchup on hand, being able to stop opposing rushers, the Eagles have allowed 9, 28, 42, 20, 13, and 66 rushing yards in terms of scrambling yards to opposing quarterbacks as of late. Expect for him to be able to surpass this number. I think that the Green Bay Packers at home will be a far more formidable opponent in comparison to what they ended up presenting this most recent week against the Panthers. Then if we close out the conversation, we need to, of course, include a player on the other side, because we need to have our plays include a second team. We're talking about Dallas Goedert. Like I mentioned before at the beginning of today's episode, going more than 3.5 receptions. If we look at the statistics here, Green Bay versus the Dallas Cowboys, Cincinnati Bengals, Arizona Cardinals, and Pittsburgh Steelers tight ends in 4 of the last 5 games, excluding the Panthers, considering their tight end usage hasn't been incredible and they don't have one premier tight end. But nonetheless, over the course of those 4 games, we have seen the Green Bay Packers give up a total of 8.5 receptions per game to those opposing tight ends throughout that 4-game streak. 8.5 receptions per game. I think 3.5 receptions. I think 35.5 receiving yards for someone like Dallas Goedert. Very much so achievable for a potential 4x play here. Those are my 3 favorite plays going into tonight's game. Be sure to go ahead, check out Betr today. Use code Andrew. Again, when you use code Andrew, you get a free $10. But when you go ahead and sign up, make that first time deposit minimum of 10 and make a first time play within a real cash play. You'll also get my rankings every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. The final thing I wanted to mention to you guys, for those of you guys who want my rankings potentially every Thursday and Sunday, and you don't want to go ahead and go through the Betr overall sign up, you can always check out the Patreon. Again, you can ask me individualized questions, direct message me, whether it is via the Patreon messenger or of course the Discord messenger. I'll be able to answer your questions. You get Discord community server access, and of course get those weekly rankings for all positions every Thursday and Sunday. So be sure to check that out down in the description. But that's going to cover for me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.